Hey folks, this is Easy Paul coming to you from Easy Acres Homestead in beautiful southern Oregon. This here is part 2 of my off-grid cabin build. If you missed the first part, be sure to check that video out first. And I feel like I should apologize. The snow has been melting around here and hitting the top of my cabin, and you might hear some of it in some of my recordings. Completely unintentional. I'll get better at it, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the video, and y'all be easy. So I was newly unemployed and living large in a wall tent in the woods. And you know, it was quite liberating. All my needs were met, I had solar power, I brought a good stockpile of food and water in with me, no bills other than my phone and vehicle insurance, and chilling on my land. But the long, warm summer days aren't going to last forever. I knew I wanted sturdier accommodations before the winter truly set in. I'm a hands-on sort of learner, and to start building this little structure, I had a nice little foundation that I was happy with. That big hole in the corner is not just my corpse hole or innocence tube. Stick around and you'll see what function that serves. I started the wall framing with fitting the window and the door. I kind of built as I go, and I knew that getting those dimensions right was critical. And allow me to state up front, this is not a building tutorial. I'm sure some of you professional builders are probably cringing at my skills, but I've been living in it now for the past 6 months, and it's been more than comfortable enough for me. I got the window and the door at a Habitat for Humanity with a friend of mine. I really needed the help because a couple weeks earlier I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident on one of my little Honda motorcycles. I tore my left shoulder AC joint, and my left arm was absolutely useless for about 8 weeks while it healed. In the meantime, I was also clearing some trees on my property and being very selective about which trees I'm removing. The largest and most numerous trees on my property are these ponderosa pines, also known as yellow pine. Ponderosa are some of the most widespread pine in the American West, dominating mostly higher and drier areas, and they're an important keystone species, especially in my area. Ponderosa pine, along with its handful of subspecies, are easily identified by the pine needles, growing in groups of 3. Some folks say that the bark smells like vanilla in the sun, but that's never been my experience. With a little help, the wall and roof framing went by pretty quickly. Well, quickly enough for Easy Acres anyway. I went with as simple a design as I could, a single pitch roof, 6 feet in the back and 8 feet in the front. That's 2 and 2.5 meters for the rest of the world. And let me be perfectly honest, I probably should have built it with a higher pitch or a steeper roof for my area to better shed the snow. But as long as I'm inside with the stove going, the snow doesn't really have a chance to build up before it melts and slides off. I am in a semi-arid environment at about 4,400 feet or 1,340 meters in elevation, and subject to some pretty heavy snowstorms some winters. On the subject of roofs, I also knocked together a little woodshed a short walk from the cabin. I arranged it for maximum sun during the day on the most open and exposed side to better dry out my firewood during the dry summer season. Just as a personal touch, I carved a little sign for it. It says Jangjakchib, which is Korean for firewood house, and I have no explanation for why I felt compelled to carve a sign for a structure whose purpose is entirely self-evident in a language not locally spoken, but I like the little personal embellishments. Once I had everything framed up more or less, I got to work sheathing it to truly make it Paul's Plywood Pleasure Palace. As I stated in my previous video, my timing as far as expense for lumber could not have been much worse. I was initially going to use some T111 siding, but I couldn't afford it, so I went with regular plywood. That said, it's a special kind of feeling just watching this little shack come together right before my eyes. Where before it was just a bare patch of ground, slowly it was turning into a rent-free little structure where I could live and do as I please. You know, I have to admit, I suffered the sin of pride once all the plywood sheathing was up and it was actually taking on the appearance of a dwelling. It was modest and maybe a little crooked and cobbled together, but it was mine. The next step was getting the roofing up, and I went as cheap and durable as possible and bought myself some of these metal panels. While getting the roofing finished, I also doubled up some of the studs on the inside to better bear the burden of the winter snowfall. A good friend of mine lives on the other side of the mountain, and he's been living off-grid full-time for the past 20 years. I met him a couple years ago when I was looking for property. His structure is more akin to a greenhouse. It's also lined with these large rocks that act as thermal batteries. His roof is steep enough to shed the snow, and while it's uninsulated, the great majority will melt and slide right off. Using these passive heating construction techniques, he's able to harvest fresh tomatoes well into December at 4,000 feet in elevation, or 1,200 meters for the rest of the world, even while the snow's falling outside. You know, it's difficult to overstate how beneficial people are to you when you're off-grid. I'm miles away from anybody, but a friend of mine, actually a fellow full-time off-gridder, he hooked me up with this beautiful rough-cut western cedar lumber for my exterior siding. Western cedar is a beautiful insect and rot-resistant wood that grows well in the higher and wetter areas of my region. We harvested a large lightning-killed tree, hauled the logs to his place, and then milled them into dimensional lumber using his huge high-capacity mill. It was a real treat to watch him work that machine like an expert and turn that rough log that was just lying on the forest floor an hour ago into planks. Well, when I ran out of the building wrap that he also gave me, I decided to recycle these Walmart bags into some field expedient house wrapping. Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to make much use as a vapor barrier, but it's what I did, and you know, it's been working great for me so far. And you know, while all this is going on, I'm still spending a hell of a lot of time cutting and splitting firewood for the upcoming winter, and also to stave off the current autumn evening chill. I don't know what it is about this sort of work, but I can really get into it when I can work with my hands and just allow my mind to wander. I'm unbeholden to any boss or manager, and also at the same time putting myself in a better position for winter. It's very grounded, centered, and zen. And you know, every hang-up or roadblock just becomes another opportunity to overcome. I accidentally hit my wheelbarrow with my truck one day and had to fashion this crude handle for it out of a big piece of juniper. That sort of problem solving is baked into the lifestyle out here, and I really enjoy that aspect of it as well. You do remember that hole in the floor of my foundation, right? Well, you'd be forgiven for assuming it was an oversight on my part, but it was actually part of the design all along. Here, I'll show you. So that's going to be the footprint for my fireplace, in contact with Mother Nature herself, for better or for worse. There's lots of ways to have a safe and attractive wood stove footprint, but this is what I did. I started by first digging into the dirt just to break it up a little bit, and brought the flagstones over to give them an initial dry fit. I gathered these stones from both my property and a nearby quarry where this volcanic basalt can be found in these large flat flagstones. And I was eager to get this done because once I had that stove in place, it'd be time to leave the wall tent and move into the plywood pleasure palace. After I was reasonably pleased with the placement of the flagstones, I cut some cedar boards to length and nailed them up on the inside edges just to block everything off. I also put down a strip of hardware cloth along the bottom, hopefully to keep the rodents out. That excellent wood stove came courtesy of the same gentleman that hooked me up with the vapor barrier and the exterior siding for my cabin. I didn't use any mortar or concrete or anything like that to hold it all together, just the dirt and these stones, and I got them to fit pretty good, pretty okay. One more thing that I do want to do at some point is put some sort of shield behind the stove and along the side just to keep it kind of off the wall and so it's not cooking the wall. But you know what? I'm at the end of my first winter and it's been working pretty good for me. So there it is, my cabin, aka Paul's Plywood Pleasure Palace, is done. Sorta. There's still a whole heap of work to do. And you know, there's always work to do. I know I can place that stove better. I know I can work on that cabin more. I ran out of exterior siding boards, and as soon as the snow clears, I'll be getting more. The interior still needs work. As you can see, it's uninsulated. But even when it's frosty and brisk outside, as long as I have a good fire going, it's nice and cozy inside. So there you have it. It's my own little slice of heaven, my adorable little acreage. I've had it for a little over a year now and been staying on it for about the past 6 months. When I first came out here, I had a lot of people tell me how hard it would be to go without one thing or another, you know, but in reality, I have just about everything I could ever want. And we should keep in mind that many people, the great majority of people on this abundantly rich planet, go with much less. I know that I'm privileged to be in the position that I am, and I might go without cell service for a couple days, but Man, you should really see the night sky out here sometime. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed watching, and if you want to stay up to date with what's going on at Easy Acres Homestead, please like and subscribe and tell me what you want to see. Make sure that you be easy.